The last few nights had been a struggle for sleep, but yesterday was different. I returned from another, utterly unremarkable, yet exhausting day at work, sinking into the same weary routine I'd lived for years. I showered, moving through the motions sluggishly, ate a microwaved meal that lacked any flavor, and finally collapsed into bed, bone-tired. This time, however, the restless hours of tossing and turning never came. Within moments of my head hitting the pillow, I was completely, deeply asleep. The dream began immediately. I was enveloped in profound darkness, standing before a specter, a pale, utterly captivating wraith. She was a breathtakingly grotesque woman, yet I was horribly transfixed, unable to tear my gaze away despite the chilling terror that seized my core. Her form was a cadaverous composition of spindly bones and withered limbs, covered in desiccated skin like ancient parchment. Death's cruel touch had long since ravaged features that I intrinsically knew had once been objects of intense desire and bitter envy. In life, this woman had possessed profound beauty, but the grave offered no escape from the uncaring caress of decay and its disfiguring toll. Where eyes should have been were two chilling, hollow sockets, yet I could still feel her fearsome gaze transfixed on me. It was horrifyingly clear that she had not been robbed of her ability to see. Brittle wisps of thin, silvery hair fell over the moldering shoulders of a black dress, its fabric reduced to tattered ruins by rot. I desperately wanted to shield my eyes from the gruesome sight, to run until my legs gave out, but I remained frozen, helplessly immobilized. A fear more powerful than anything I'd ever known locked me in place. I could only watch. ... Immobilized by terror, I watched as the spectral woman slowly opened her shriveled mouth. She revealed a tongue that was swollen with rot and emitted a mournful wail, a deep wail of profound, immeasurable grief. Wave after wave of agonizing despair washed over me. I became utterly engulfed in the wraith's excruciating sorrow, as it seemed to seep through my flesh, down into the marrow of my bones, and sink into my very being, poisoning me with her anguish. I felt an intense, painful coldness and the heavy, leaden weight of her misery. "Please stop," I cried out internally, desperate to bring an end to our shared woe. "Stop it." But the wraith was pitiless. She took no notice of my plea and continued to let out her tormented, sorrowful sound. Then, with a gasp, I awoke. Drenched in sweat. A narrow sliver of moonlight peered through the closed curtains as I shakily sat up, instantly knowing that sleep was now impossible. I switched on the television and tried to find a comfortable position, but a dull headache was already starting to throb behind my eyes, and my joints felt strangely stiff, like they were full of glass shards. I watched TV listlessly until the sun rose, utterly dreading the long shift ahead. Though I desperately wanted to stay in bed and try to sleep through the pain gnawing at my body, I simply couldn't afford to miss work. As I was getting ready to leave, my phone rang. The caller was Evan, a childhood neighbor. I answered quickly. "Hey, Evan, I hope I don't sound rude, but I'm about to head out. Can I call you back this evening?" His grave tone stopped me in my tracks. "No, this can't wait," he replied. "I'm afraid I have some—" "What's wrong?" I asked, my voice tight with apprehension, already fearing the answer. Evan sighed heavily. "I woke up a few minutes ago when I heard ambulance sirens outside. They were there for your dad." The chilling trepidation in my chest gave way to a rapid, pounding heart. I gripped the kitchen counter to steady myself, feeling suddenly hot, sick, and dizzy. Do you know what happened?" My mouth struggled to form the words. Evan could only confirm that they had taken him to the hospital, explaining that he called because he suspected Dad hadn't listed me as an emergency contact. "I really think you need to get down here as soon as you can." I barely remember the rest of our brief conversation, only vaguely recalling thanking Evan and his quiet apology for delivering such awful news. I hung up the phone, grabbed my keys, and rushed out. The hour-long drive home felt like an eternity. Gad, who had always prioritized his health, jogging daily, eating well, abstaining from drinking or smoking, struck down so suddenly was the worst kind of shock. It ripped open an old wound. The world-shattering grief from when a drunk driver killed my mother when I was 13. Dad was the only family I had left. The thought of truly being alone in the world was devastating beyond measure. My feet carried me through the hospital doors, down the sterile hallways, and into the elevator until I finally reached Dad's room. I nearly broke down when I saw him. My father looked like a ghost of his former self, a frail wisp of a man who had always seemed larger than life. I gently touched his hand, and his eyelids began to flutter. "Hey, Dad," I whispered softly. "I'm here." His eyes flew open at the sound of my voice, though the motion clearly caused him great pain. He slowly turned his head to face me. "Son," he rasped, "thank God you're here." I tried to soothe him. "Evan called me. Try to get some rest. I'm not going anywhere." "No, there's something I need to tell you." "We could talk about it later, Dad. Right now, all that matters is that you—" "No," protested, his voice surprisingly sharp and insistent despite his fragile state. It was a rare, alarming tone. "There isn't any time to waste. It won't be long now." "Dad, don't talk like that," I pleaded, trying to give him a reassuring smile, but he only shook his head wearily. "No, it's not." He paused, taking a shaky breath. "Did you have a dream last night?" "What?" I asked, completely thrown off. "Did you?" Dad pressed. "Not just a dream, but a nightmare, probably the worst one you can ever remember having." My smile vanished. The strong, chemical scent of disinfectant, burning its way into my nostrils, suddenly made the hospital room feel suffocatingly warm and intensely sickening. Dad read the expression on my face and let out a quiet sigh. I knew it. Though his voice had weakened, it carried the heavy weight of sad resignation. "There's nothing that can be done." I peered over my shoulder, scanning the hallway for any medical staff, completely failing to understand what he was saying. but knowing that something deeply unsettling was unfolding. "Please, don't be afraid, son. That's the reason I never told you of any of this before. I didn't want to scare you. I thought I was doing the right thing, that you'd be better off not knowing. But maybe that was a mistake." "Dad, what on earth are you talking about?" "You saw her," Dad whispered. "The ghost in your dream. The same cold hand of foreboding that had gripped my heart earlier returned to clench me within its dreadful grasp once again." "I never told you," I stated, my voice barely a whisper. "You didn't have to," Dad replied. "You're not the first person to have seen her. She's appeared in our family nightmares for decades. When a relative is about to die, one of us will dream of her, and that's why she came to you. You and I are all that's left, and my time is fast approaching." I stared at my father in disbelief. "Dad, I'm sorry, but that just isn't possible. Things like that aren't real." "That's almost exactly what I said when your grandfather told me about her," he countered. "He told me he'd seen her the night before his mother was killed in a diner robbery. I didn't believe him then, thinking he was just getting his memories mixed up. I told him gently that ghosts and premonitions only exist in our imaginations. And he told me that I'd find out just how wrong I was one day. And I did," Dad finished. "Just a couple of years later, when I wiped beads of sweat from my brow. If what you say is true, then why not warn everybody in the family and try to prevent it from happening?" "That doesn't work," he said solemnly. "Do you remember your Aunt Helen's accident?" Dad asked. I nodded, recalling that his brother's wife had suffered a seizure and fractured her skull in a fall, followed by Uncle Dean's death from flu complications soon after. Dean had called Dad in the middle of the night, completely beside himself. He'd had the dream and knew what it meant. He was panicking, trying to prevent it, telling Dad he'd keep Helen home. Helen later called Dad, saying his brother had completely lost his mind. Dad told her to just play along, swearing he'd talk sense into Dean the next day. "And then what?" Dad's voice cracked. "She hung up the phone, went to take a shower, and cracked her head open on the side of the bathtub. She had never had a seizure before, but the autopsy found a brain tumor." I argued. "That means it was only a matter of time. It had nothing to do with a bad dream." "Maybe," Dad conceded. "But I went to bed not even a month later and dreamed of the woman a second time, and she let out that horrible moan. I instantly remembered the hideous wail from my own nightmare." Dad continued. "He ran down the hall to check on me, saw I was asleep, and immediately called Dean. Dean never answered. Dad rushed to Dean's house, let himself in with the spare key, and found him crumbled in the very same bathtub where Helen had fallen. He ended his own life. I furrowed my brow, struggling to reconcile his words with my memory. "But you told me Uncle Dean was sick. You said he had the flu, and that's why he stopped visiting us." Dad's face contorted with regret. "Your mother and I thought that you were too young to understand. ... He explained that his brother was so heartbroken by Helen's death that he was barely getting out of bed, refusing to eat or sleep, no matter how much Dad begged him to stay with us. I've always regretted not doing enough to help him. Just like I've come to regret not telling you the truth about everything long ago. A distressing realization suddenly struck me. Hey, Dad, did Mom know about any of this? He turned his head away. I knew how terribly he missed her, since that late-night trip to the corner store took her away. Did you have a dream before her accident? I leaned over Dad's bed, desperate for his answer, only to see his features contorted into a wounded grimace, silent tears streaming down his cheeks. I stumbled backwards, nearly knocking my chair over. Why didn't you warn her? I shouted, hot tears of anger and devastation pricking at my own eyes. You knew something was going to happen. You could have stopped it. I tried, Dad cried, his voice raw. We've been arguing. I fell asleep and had the dream, and I woke up to find a note from her. She wrote that she was taking a drive to clear her head. I jumped out of bed and drove around looking for her, and that's when I saw the wreck. Dad choked back a sob. I sank back into my chair, completely drained. The crushing array of emotions, combined with the potent smell of bleach, made the migraine hammering at my skull intensify with every breath. Why didn't you ever tell me the truth? I asked quietly. About Mom? About any of this? I'm sorry. What the hell was that? Well, supposedly he worked for an unlicensed children's home that was later shut down. The methods they used to procure babies were cruel. Their tactic was to deceive struggling single mothers into signing over temporary custody, only to immediately adopt the babies out to wealthy families for under-the-table deals. Sometimes they even kidnapped babies from poor families by posing as social workers. And sometimes, if a mother resisted, they did whatever it took to separate her from her child. Dad's rumored job was to bring in 4 babies a month, and he worked there for nearly 15 years. You see, I think the root of our family's torment lies somewhere beneath all the pain that he had caused. I blinked, staggered by this heinous revelation. Now I understood why Dad had distanced himself from most of his family. Are you saying that's why you think we're cursed? I'm saying that grief is a powerful emotion, and so is rage. Maybe both can linger long after a person is gone. We sat in silence for several long moments before I spoke again. What now? I finally asked. Am I supposed to just sit here, helplessly, and wait for you to die? Dad tried to reach for my hand, but he was too weak to lift his own. It's not that simple, son. His voice was faint, clearly spent from the emotional cost of our conversation. But you said there's nothing anybody can do. Dad shook his head one final, weary time. I didn't tell you all of this because I'm dying. Son, I'm trying to warn you. I stared at him, my mind reeling. I don't understand, Dad. He looked me straight in the eyes, his own eyes full of profound sorrow and a terrifying urgency. It wasn't the chest pains that woke me up this morning. It was the dream that I had. I froze. My stomach dropped as the horrific, ultimate realization I saw her too. Thank you for watching. If you found this story compelling and unsettling, please give it a like, comment below with your theory on the curse, and share this video to support the channel. I'll see you in the next nightmare.